The auction hall buzzed with alien voices speaking in dozens of languages, creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and harmonics that would have been impossible for human ears to distinguish just a century ago. Now, thanks to universal translators, Maya Chun understood every dismissive comment, every condescending laugh, and every skeptical observation about her presence in the most exclusive archaeological auction in the galaxy. She sat quietly in the back row, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering Vorthack collectors with their crystalline exoskeletons, the serpentine Seth dealers whose scales shimmered with bioluminescent patterns, and the ethereal Zephyrians whose gaseous forms barely maintained coherence in their containment suits. At 19, Maya looked even younger than her years, her black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing clothes that marked her as someone who spent more time in dig sites than auction houses. The auctioneer, a distinguished Kytherian whose four arms moved in elegant gestures, called attention to the next lot. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all configurations, we present item 779. The Vanguard Armor of the Lost Ancients, discovered in the depths of Kepler 442b's crystal caves. A collective intake of breath swept through the hall as the massive display case was wheeled onto the stage. The armor stood 8 feet tall, its surface a mesmerizing blend of what appeared to be living metal and crystalline structures that pulsed with an inner light. The craftsmanship was beyond anything the assembled collectors had seen, even from the most advanced civilizations. Microscopic engravings covered every surface, forming patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. The metallurgy alone defies analysis, the auctioneer continued. Our best xenoarchaeologists estimate this piece to be at least 50,000 years old, predating any known civilization. The quantum resonance patterns suggest technologies that we can barely comprehend, let alone replicate. A Vorthack collector in the front row, her crystalline form refracting the auction hall's lights into rainbow patterns, raised one of her sharp appendages. Has anyone attempted to interface with the armor's systems? Several attempts have been made, the auctioneer replied. The armor appears to be biometrically locked, though to what species remains unknown. The University of Galactic Science's top researchers have been unable to activate even its basic functions. Maya's fingers traced the small device hidden in her jacket pocket. She had built the scanner herself, using principles that no one else in the galaxy understood because no one else had grown up with the same foundation of human ingenuity and stubborn refusal to accept that something couldn't be figured out. A Seth dealer's translator crackled to life. The bidding will be intense. Collector Vextherin has been seeking ancient artifacts for his museum on Proxima Centauri. He's willing to spend whatever it takes. Foolish, hissed another Seth. Pretty to look at, but useless. Cannot even activate basic systems. Better to invest in functional technology. Maya almost smiled. If only they knew. The auctioneer began the bidding at 50,000 galactic credits. The price climbed rapidly as serious collectors threw their resources at the mysterious artifact. Maya watched the numbers rise, calculating carefully. Her savings from 3 years of archaeological consulting work would cover the opening bid, but she would need to be strategic. 200,000, called out a Zephyrian, his gaseous form brightening with excitement. 250,000, countered Collector Vextherin, a hulking Brutari whose species was known for their wealth and their tendency to acquire anything that made them appear more cultured. Maya waited. She had learned patience in the dig sites, spending weeks carefully brushing away centuries of sediment to reveal fragments of the past. The same patience would serve her here. 500,000. The bid came from an unexpected source, a Kytherian scientist whose 4 arms gestured frantically. The research potential alone justifies the cost. The hall fell silent. 500,000 galactic credits was more than most beings would see in a lifetime. Maya could feel the attention of the room shifting, the serious collectors reassessing their positions. Going once at 500,000, the auctioneer announced. Maya raised her hand. 600,000. The hall erupted in surprise chatter. Heads turned toward the back row, where the small human sat calmly, her hand still raised. A Vorthat collector's laugh rang out like breaking crystal. The human child thinks she can play with the adults, the crystalline being said, her translator making her amusement clear to all. Does she even understand the value of galactic credits? Perhaps she confused the currency, suggested a Seth, his scales flickering with what his species considered humor. Humans are still new to galactic commerce. Maya felt the familiar burn of underestimation. She had felt it in university when professors assumed she was too young to understand complex archaeological theories. She had felt it at dig sites when senior researchers dismissed her insights. She had felt it in academic conferences where her papers were questioned not on merit, but on her age and species. 650,000. Collector Vextherin called out, his massive frame turning to stare at Maya with four cold eyes. 700,000. Maya responded without hesitation. The Bertari's growl resonated through the hall. 800,000. 1 million, Maya said quietly, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent auction hall. The number hung in the air like a challenge. 1 million galactic credits was an astronomical sum, enough to purchase a small starship or fund a major archaeological expedition. The fact that it came from a human barely out of her teens made it seem almost absurd. Collector Vextherin studied Maya for a long moment, his species' natural ability to read biosignatures telling him something that puzzled him. The human's heart rate was steady, her breathing calm. She wasn't bluffing or hoping. She was confident. 1.1 million, he said finally. Maya reached in her jacket and pulled out a small, worn datapad. She tapped the screen a few times, checking something, then looked back up at the auctioneer. 2 million galactic credits, she announced. The hall exploded into chaos. Collectors were shouting in their native languages, translators struggling to keep up with the cacophony of disbelief, outrage, and fascination. A human had just made a bid that exceeded the gross domestic product of several minor worlds. The auctioneer's four arms moved frantically, trying to restore order. Ladies and gentlemen, please. The bid stands at 2 million from the human representative in the back. This is ridiculous, the Vorthat collector's translator crackled. No human has access to those resources. She's wasting everyone's time. The Galactic Auction Authority requires proof of funds for bids over 1 million. Another collector called out. Maya stood up slowly, her small frame seeming to grow larger as every eye in the hall focused on her. She walked down the center aisle, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. When she reached the auctioneer's podium, she held out her datapad. The auctioneer's scanner read the financial information, and his expression shifted from skepticism to shock to something approaching awe. He looked at Maya, then at the datapad, then back at Maya. The funds are verified, he announced, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. The human bidder has legitimate access to 2 million galactic credits. The silence that followed was profound. Maya turned to face the assembled collectors, seeing the mixture of confusion, resentment, and nascent respect in their alien features. Any further bids? The auctioneer asked, though his tone suggested he didn't expect any. Collector Vextherin stood up, his massive form towering over the smaller beings around him. I concede, he rumbled, but I would like to know how a human child acquired such resources. Maya met his gaze steadily. The same way anyone acquires anything of value, through knowledge, skill, and understanding what others cannot see. She turned back to the auctioneer. I believe you were saying going once? Going twice, the auctioneer said quickly, recovering his professional demeanor. Sold to the human bidder for 2 million galactic credits. As the hammer fell, Maya felt a satisfaction that had nothing to do with the purchase itself. She had spent 2 million credits not just on an artifact, but on a statement. She was not a child playing in adult spaces. She was not a curiosity to be dismissed or condescended to. She was a force to be reckoned with. The aftermath of the auction was a whirlwind of paperwork, financial transfers, and arrangements for shipping. Maya handled it all with quiet efficiency, ignoring the stares and whispered conversations happening around her. Several collectors approach her with offers to purchase the armor from her to profit, but she politely declined each one. As she was finalizing the shipping arrangements, collector Vextherin approached her. Up close, his brutary physiology was even more impressive. His 4 arms, each ending in hands that could crush stone, his hide scarred from what she recognized as ritual combat markings. "You puzzle me, human," he said, his translator rendering his deep rumble into standard galactic. "Your species is young, your individual lifespan brief. Why spend such resources on something you cannot use?" Maya looked up at him, noting the genuine curiosity in his tone rather than the dismissiveness she had grown accustomed to. "What makes you think I can't use it? The armor is biometrically locked to an unknown species. Our best scientists have been unable to even access its basic functions. It is a magnificent display piece, but functionally useless." "Your scientists made assumptions," Maya replied. "They assumed that because they couldn't understand it, it couldn't be understood. They assumed that because their technology couldn't interface with it, no technology could. They assumed that because it was old, the species that created it was gone." Vextherin's 4 eyes narrowed. "You speak as if you know something they do not." Maya shouldered her small travel bag, the same worn pack she had carried through dig sites across the galaxy. "I know that assumptions are dangerous things. I know that just because something seems impossible doesn't mean it is. And I know that sometimes the most important discoveries come from the most unexpected places." She started to walk away, then paused and looked back at the massive brutari. "Your species values strength above all else, Collector Vextherin. But there are many kinds of strength. The strength to break things, yes, but also the strength to build them, the strength to understand them, the strength to see what others cannot." As Maya left the auction hall, she could feel the weight of hundreds of alien gazes following her. Some were curious, some were dismissive, some were calculating. She ignored them all. She had work to do. The armor would be delivered to her workshop on Luna Station within 3 days. 3 days to prepare for the moment she had been planning for since she first saw the preliminary auction images 6 months ago. 3 days before she proved to the galaxy that humans were not the young, naive species that most aliens believed them to be. 3 days before she showed them what human ingenuity could accomplish when combined with knowledge that stretched back far longer than anyone suspected. As her transport lifted off from the auction station, Maya allowed herself a small smile. The real show was just beginning. Maya's workshop on Luna Station was a testament to organized chaos. Tables covered with archaeological artifacts, computer displays showing molecular diagrams, and prototype devices that would have baffled most xenotechnologists filled the converted cargo bay she had purchased with her first major consulting fee. The walls were lined with her collection of ancient technologies, each piece carefully cataloged and studied. She had chosen Luna Station specifically for its location and its policies. Situated in the Sol system, but technically independent, it operated under laws that favored researchers and inventors. More importantly, it had the kind of privacy that allowed someone to work on projects that might raise uncomfortable questions. The armor arrived exactly on schedule, delivered by a transport crew that seemed more interested in getting their payment and leaving than in making conversation with the human who had caused such a stir at the auction. Maya supervised the installation of the display case in the center of her workshop, ensuring that every environmental control was perfect. When she was finally alone with her purchase, Maya allowed herself a moment to simply appreciate what stood before her. The armor was even more magnificent in person than it had been in the auction hall. The way the light played across its surface revealed details that the display case had hidden, microscopic engravings that formed patterns within patterns, creating a complexity that could have occupied artists for centuries. But Maya wasn't interested in its artistic value. She approached the case and began a detailed scan with her custom-built analyzer, a device that combined human engineering principles with technologies she had reverse-engineered from a dozen different civilizations. The readings confirmed what she had suspected from the preliminary images. The armor wasn't just using unknown metallurgy and crystal matrix technology. It was using principles that she recognized from her own research, principles that no one else in the galaxy should have been able to identify, because they were based on theories that humans had only developed in the last 50 years. Maya opened a secure channel to her personal database and began cross-referencing the scan results with files that she had spent years accumulating. Archaeological surveys from worlds that officially had never been visited by any known civilization. Metallurgical analyses of artifacts that had been dismissed as curiosities by mainstream xenoarchaeologists. Theoretical physics papers that had been published in obscure human journals and ignored by the wider galactic community. Piece by piece, the picture came together. The armor wasn't created by an unknown alien civilization. It was human work, created using technologies that represented the culmination of scientific principles that humans were only now beginning to understand. The biometric locks weren't keyed to an unknown species. They were keyed to human genetic markers, but one so specific that they might only match a handful of individuals in the entire galaxy. Maya's hands shook slightly as she began the process of opening the display case. She had been building toward this moment for 3 years, ever since she had first discovered evidence of human presence on worlds that predated Earth's recorded history by millennia. Evidence that suggested humans hadn't originated on Earth, but had once been spread across the galaxy before some catastrophe had reduced them to a single world with no memory of their past. The case opened with a soft hiss of equalizing atmosphere. Maya stepped forward and placed her hand on the armor's chest plate, feeling the cool metal warm under her touch. For a moment, nothing happened, and she wondered if her theories were wrong, if she had spent 2 million credits and 3 years of research chasing shadows. Then, the armor came alive. Light flowed through the crystal matrices like liquid starlight, and Maya felt a sensation she had never experienced before, as if something vast and ancient was recognizing her, welcoming her home. The armor's systems activated with a harmony that spoke of technologies beyond anything the current galaxy had achieved. Information flowed into her mind, not through her universal translator, but directly in concepts and understanding that bypassed language entirely. The armor was indeed human-made, created by a civilization that had reached heights of technological and artistic achievement that made the current galactic powers look primitive by comparison. But that civilization had fallen, victims of their own success and the jealousy of younger species who had feared human potential. The armor was one of many artifacts hidden across the galaxy, waiting for the day when humans would reclaim their heritage. But it was more than just a relic of the past. It was a test, a key, and a weapon all in one. Maya felt the armor's systems synchronizing with her biometrics, learning her patterns, adapting to her needs. She understood now why the galactic scientists had been unable to activate it. It wasn't just biometrically locked to humans in general. It was specifically designed to respond only to humans who carried certain genetic markers, markers that indicated descent from the original human colony ships that had first spread across the galaxy. She was one of perhaps a dozen humans alive who could activate the armor, and possibly the only one who had the knowledge and resources to understand what it truly represented. As the initialization process completed, Maya felt the armor's full capabilities becoming available to her. Enhanced strength and speed that would let her match or exceed any known species. Energy shields that could deflect weapons that hadn't been invented yet. Sensors that could analyze matter down to the subatomic level, and processing power that could solve problems in microseconds that would take teams of scientists months to work through. But most importantly, the armor contained data, vast libraries of information about human history, technology, and culture from the time before the Great Catastrophe. Star charts showing the locations of other hidden artifacts. Technical specifications for technologies that could revolutionize galactic civilization. And, most crucially, evidence of what had really happened to the original human empire and who was responsible for its fall. Maya stepped back from the armor, her mind reeling from the implications of what she had discovered. She had purchased what she thought was an ancient alien artifact, and found instead the key to humanity's forgotten past, and possibly its future. But she also understood that she was now in tremendous danger. The same forces that had brought down the original human civilization were still active in the galaxy, still working to ensure that humans remained a young, weak species confined to the edges of galactic society. If they learned what she had discovered, they would stop at nothing to silence her. She needed allies, but she couldn't trust anyone in the galactic community. She needed resources, but she couldn't use official channels. She needed time to study the armor's data and understand the full scope of what she was dealing with, but she suspected that time was a luxury she didn't have. Maya looked at the armor, its systems now dormant, but ready to activate at her command. Tomorrow, she would begin the dangerous process of reaching out to other humans who might carry the genetic markers. She would start building a network of individuals who could help her uncover the truth and prepare for what was coming. But tonight, she would study. She would learn. And she would begin planning for the day when humanity would reclaim its rightful place in the galaxy. The small human who had been dismissed and condescended to at the auction was gone. In her place stood something far more dangerous, a human who knew her true heritage and had the tools to act on that knowledge. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's reputation for being young and naive was not just inaccurate, but deliberately cultivated. And that discovery would change everything. Maya had been wearing the armor for 72 hours straight, and she felt better than she had in her entire life. The bio-support systems regulated everything from her heart rate to her nutritional needs, while the neural interface had expanded her cognitive abilities to levels she hadn't thought possible. What should have been weeks of research and analysis had been compressed into 3 days of continuous discovery. The armor's database contained detailed records of 17 worlds where additional artifacts were hidden, but, more importantly, it contained the identity files of 43 humans currently alive in the galaxy who carried the correct genetic markers. Most were unaware of their heritage, living ordinary lives as traders, engineers, researchers, and explorers scattered across dozens of systems. Maya had spent the first day analyzing the data, the second day developing a secure communication protocol, and the third day preparing for what she knew would be the most dangerous phase of her plan. She was about to contact people who had no idea that their entire understanding of human history was wrong, and convince them to join her in a mission that could reshape galactic civilization or get them all killed. She started with the closest match, both geographically and genetically. Dr. James Morrison was a xenobiologist stationed on Kepler 438b, studying the evolutionary patterns of silicon-based life forms. According to the armor's analysis, he carried genetic markers that suggested his lineage traced back to the original colony ship Aspiration, which had established human settlements in the Kepler system before the Great Catastrophe. Maya composed her message carefully, knowing that she would have one chance to capture his attention before he dismissed her as a crank or worse, reported her to galactic authorities. She included genetic analysis data that he would be able to verify independently, star charts that showed details about his system that weren't in any official databases, and a single image of a molecular structure that she knew would be familiar to anyone studying silicon-based life. The molecular structure was one that could only be created by the biomodification techniques used by the original human colonies, techniques that had been lost for thousands of years, but which still left their signature in the genetic code of species they had encountered. The response came back within 6 hours. "Who are you? And how do you know about the Morrison paradox?" Maya smiled. The Morrison paradox was Dr. Morrison's private name for an anomaly he had discovered in his research, but never published because it seemed to suggest that someone had been deliberately modifying silicon-based life forms in the Kepler system using technologies that didn't exist. He had kept it to himself because it contradicted everything the galactic scientific community believed about the system's history. Her reply was simple. "I know because my ancestors were the ones who made those modifications. And I can prove it. Are you willing to listen?" The conversation that followed lasted 18 hours, and convinced Dr. Morrison to request emergency leave from his research station. 2 days later, he arrived at Luna Station carrying only a small bag and a head full of questions that Maya was finally able to answer. James Morrison was a tall, lean man in his 40s with the kind of practical demeanor that came from years of fieldwork in hostile environments. His initial skepticism evaporated when Maya showed him the armor and activated its historical databases. The records contained not just his family lineage going back 300 generations, but detailed information about the research his ancestors had conducted on silicon-based life forms, research that explained every anomaly he had discovered in his own work. "This is impossible," he said, staring at genetic records that showed his great-great-grandmother had been a biomodification specialist on the colony ship Aspiration. "If humans had this level of technology, if we had colonies across the galaxy, why don't we remember? Why are we confined to Earth and a handful of recent settlements?" Maya showed him the next section of the database, the records of what the armor's creators had called the Suppression War. The story that emerged was one of jealousy, fear, and systematic genocide carried out by a coalition of species who had decided that humanity's rapid expansion and technological development posed an existential threat to the established galactic order. The war had lasted 3 centuries and ended with humanity reduced to a single world, their technology destroyed, their colonies scattered or eliminated, and their survivors subjected to genetic modification designed to limit their cognitive development and suppress their innovative instincts. The few humans who had escaped the modification had gone into hiding, leaving behind caches of technology and information for the day when their descendants would be ready to reclaim their heritage. "The species that did this to us," Morrison said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "they're still out there. Some of them are members of the Galactic Council." Maya nodded grimly. The Vorthack were the primary instigators. They convinced the other species that humans were an invasive species that would eventually consume the entire galaxy. The Kytherian provided the genetic modification technology. The Seth handled the intelligence operations that kept human survivors from organizing. And the Brutari provided the military force to destroy human colonies. And now they maintain the fiction that humans are a young species that only recently achieved interstellar travel. They monitor human colonies for signs of technological advancement that exceeds their expectations. Any human who shows too much innovation or asks too many questions tends to have accidents or disappears. Morrison was quiet for a long time, processing the implications. Finally, he looked up at Maya with new understanding in his eyes. "That's why you've been so careful about your research. Why you work independently. Why you avoid mainstream academic channels. You've known about this for years." "I've suspected for 3 years," Maya corrected. "I've known for 3 days." The armor confirmed what my research had suggested, but also showed me how much bigger this is than I had imagined. There are artifacts hidden on 17 worlds, James. Technologies that could advance human civilization by thousands of years overnight. But more importantly, there are records of what really happened, evidence that could expose the truth to the galaxy. Evidence that would also paint a target on every human in existence, Morrison pointed out. If the species responsible for the original genocide learned that we were recovering our heritage, what do you think they would do? Maya stood up and activated the armor's external display, showing him a holographic star map that revealed the current positions of human colonies and the patrol routes of various alien military forces. The pattern was unmistakable. Human worlds were constantly monitored, and any that showed signs of technological advancement beyond expected parameters were subjected to increased scrutiny. "They're already watching us," she said. "The only question is whether we recover our strength before they decide we've become dangerous again. And that depends on how quickly we can locate and activate the other artifacts." Maya looked at him steadily. "The armor's records show 43 humans with the genetic markers needed to activate the artifacts. I can't do this alone, and I can't trust anyone outside our species. I need allies, James. People who understand what we're fighting for and what we're fighting against." Morrison studied the star map, noting the locations of the hidden artifacts and the positions of human settlements. His scientific mind was already working through the logistics, the challenges, and the risks. Finally, he nodded. Where do we start? Over the next 2 weeks, Maya and Morrison developed a recruitment protocol and began reaching out to the other genetic matches. The process was slow and careful, requiring extensive verification and gradual revelation of information. Many of the initial contacts were skeptical or afraid. Some refused to believe the evidence. A few agreed to meet, but failed to show up at the arranged locations. But enough responded positively to begin building what Maya privately thought of as the Restoration Network. Elena Vasquez, a starship engineer working on the frontier, arrived with technical specifications for stealth modifications that could keep their ships invisible to standard galactic sensors. Marcus Webb, a former military specialist turned private security consultant, brought tactical knowledge and contacts who could provide equipment without asking questions. Dr. Sarah Chun, a xenoarchaeologist and Maya's distant cousin, contributed her expertise in ancient civilizations and her own suspicions about gaps in the galactic historical record. Each new recruit brought not just their own skills, but confirmation that the genetic markers were real and that the armor's historical records were accurate. Elena's engineering knowledge allowed her to understand and improve on technology that had been dismissed as impossible by the galactic scientific community. Marcus's military experience let him recognize tactical patterns in the historical records that prove humans had once been formidable warriors as well as innovators. Sarah's archaeological background helped her identify sites where additional evidence might be found. But it was Dr. Morrison who made the breakthrough that changed everything. While studying the armor's biological modification records, he discovered that the genetic changes imposed on humanity during the Suppression War weren't permanent. They were designed to be inheritable, but not irreversible, possibly as a safeguard in case the victorious species ever needed human innovation for their own purposes. More importantly, exposure to certain energy frequencies could accelerate the reversal process, essentially awakening dormant human potential in individuals who didn't carry the original genetic markers. The armor isn't just a piece of technology, he explained to the assembled group in Maya's workshop. It's a catalyst. The longer Maya wears it, the more her genetic potential is being unlocked. But more than that, proximity to the armor is having effects on all of us. We're all testing higher on cognitive assessments, showing improved reflexes, demonstrating enhanced problem-solving abilities. Maya felt a chill of realization. The armor isn't just meant to be worn by one person. It's meant to awaken human potential in anyone exposed to it. That's why there are multiple artifacts scattered across the galaxy. Each one was meant to serve as a focal point for human revival, which means, Marcus added grimly, that the species who suppressed us originally will have ways to detect when the artifacts are activated. We're probably already on their radar. As if summoned by his words, Maya's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender identification made her blood run cold. Collector Vextherin. The message was brief, but loaded with implications. I have information you need about the armor you purchased. Meet me at coordinates I'm transmitting. Come alone, or this opportunity will not arise again. Maya looked at the coordinates and recognized them as the location of an abandoned mining station in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Remote enough for a private meeting, but also isolated enough for an ambush. It's a trap, Marcus said immediately. No question about it. The timing is too convenient. Maybe, Maya agreed. But he's right that I need information. The armor's databases are extensive, but they're 3,000 years old. I need to know what the current situation is, which species are still actively suppressing human development, and what resources they have available. You can't go alone, Elena protested. If it is a trap, you'll need backup. Maya looked at her assembled allies, these humans who had been living ordinary lives just weeks ago and were now part of a conspiracy that could reshape the galaxy or get them all killed. They deserved better than to be led into danger by her decisions. But They also deserve the truth about their heritage and the chance to reclaim what had been stolen from their species. I'm not going alone, she said finally. The armor has stealth capabilities that weren't demonstrated at the auction. I can get close enough to assess the situation before committing to the meeting. If it is a trap, I'll know before I'm caught in it. And if it's not a trap? Morrison asked. Maya considered the question carefully. Collector Vextherin had shown her more respect than most aliens, and his species valued directness over deception. If he had information about the armor, it was possible that he had discovered something about human history that made him willing to risk contact with her. Then, we might have our first non-human ally, she said, or at least someone who can give us intelligence about our enemies. 3 hours later, Maya was floating through space in the armor, its stealth systems rendering her virtually invisible to any sensors the abandoned mining station might have. The armor's enhanced vision let her examine every approach to the station, identifying 3 potential ambush points and 2 escape routes before she was detected. But as she got closer, she realized that Vextherin hadn't come alone either. The Brutari ship was accompanied by 2 smaller vessels, their configurations unfamiliar to her. More concerning, her scans detected energy signatures that matched weapon systems far more advanced than anything the Brutari normally carried. Maya activated a secure channel to her allies back on Luna Station. I'm detecting unknown vessel configurations and advanced weapons. This might be bigger than we thought. Marcus's voice came back immediately. Abort and return. We can't risk losing you. But as Maya prepared to retreat, something made her pause. The unknown vessels weren't positioned for an ambush. They were positioned defensively, as if Vextherin was the one expecting trouble. And the energy signatures she had detected weren't weapon systems at all. They were sensor arrays designed for long-range detection rather than combat. Someone was watching the meeting, but it wasn't Vextherin. Maya made a decision that would have profound consequences for everything that followed. Instead of retreating, she activated the armor's communication systems and sent a message to Collector Vextherin. I'm here, but we're being watched by ships with advanced sensor arrays. Are you aware of this? The response came back within seconds. I was hoping you would detect them. We need to talk, human, but not here. Follow me. Vextherin's ship began moving deeper into the asteroid belt, followed by the 2 defensive vessels. Maya hesitated for just a moment before following, knowing that she was about to learn something that would change the nature of her mission entirely. What she discovered in the next hour would force her to reconsider everything she thought she knew about the current state of galactic politics and humanity's place in it. The hidden facility that Vextherin led her to was not what Maya had expected. Carved into a massive asteroid deep in the belt, it showed signs of construction techniques that were far older than anything in current galactic records. The docking bay that opened to receive them was large enough to accommodate ships 10 times the size of Vextherin's vessel, and the power signatures Maya detected suggested technologies that rivaled even the armor's capabilities. As Maya followed the Brutari through corridors lined with symbols that made her armor's translation systems work over time, she began to understand that this meeting was not what she had anticipated. This wasn't a negotiation or a trap. This was a revelation. The chamber of Vextherin led her to a circular and vast, its walls covered with holographic displays showing star maps, genetic analyses, and historical records that span millennia. But it was the beings waiting for them that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. There were representatives of a dozen species, but none of them were from the major galactic powers. The Alterans, whose crystalline civilization had been destroyed 3,000 years ago by unknown attackers. The Denebans, a nomadic species that had supposedly gone extinct 2 millennia ago. The Vegan Collective, whose biotechnological empire had vanished from the historical record so completely that most species didn't believe they had ever existed. And at the center of the chamber, in a stasis field that kept his ancient form preserved, was a being that Maya's armor identified as human. But this wasn't a human from Earth or any of the known colonies. This was one of the original humans from before the Suppression War, and he was still alive. Welcome, daughter of the lost lines, the ancient human said, his voice carrying across the chamber through speakers that translated his archaic dialect into something Maya could understand. I am Administrator Kane, and I have been waiting 3,000 years for one of you to find an awakener. Maya felt the armor systems responding to the ancient human's presence, unlocking data files that had remained sealed even to her previous explorations. The information that flooded into her consciousness was staggering in its scope and implications. The facility was one of dozens scattered throughout the galaxy, hidden bases established during the final years of the Suppression War when it became clear that humanity was going to lose. Each base was staffed by volunteers who entered stasis to wait for the day when their descendants would be ready to reclaim their heritage. Some bases had been discovered and destroyed over the millennia. Others had failed due to mechanical problems or natural disasters. But 17 remained operational, guarded by species that had also been victims of the coalition that destroyed human civilization. The war was never just about humans. Administrator Kane explained as Maya processed the data downloads. We were simply the first species to develop too quickly to show too much potential. The coalition that destroyed us has been systematically eliminating or suppressing any species that threatens their control of the galaxy. The Alterans were next, then the Denebans, then dozens of others. Vextheron stepped forward, his massive form somehow seeming less threatening than it had at the auction. My people were scheduled for suppression 60 years ago, he said. We only avoided it by agreeing to serve as enforcers for the coalition. But there are those among us who remember what we sacrificed for that survival. Maya looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives, beginning to understand the true scope of what she had stumbled into. You're building a resistance. We've been building a resistance for 3,000 years, corrected a being that Maya's armor identified as Alteron. The crystalline entity's form shifted and flowed as it spoke, its voice like the sound of wind through crystal chimes. Waiting for the day when the original suppressed species would recover enough to lead the fight. Why us? Maya asked. If you've been preparing for millennia, if you have technology and resources, why do you need humanity to lead anything? Administrator Kane's ancient face showed a slight smile. Because, daughter, humans were never just innovative. You were integrative. While other species developed specialized technologies and focused on perfecting single areas of advancement, humans learned to combine technologies from different sources to see connections that others missed to create hybrid solutions that surpassed anything that came before. The holographic displays around the chamber shifted to show examples. Human colonies that had taken Vorthack crystal technology and combined it with Kytherian biomodification to create living cities that grew and adapted to their environments. Human ships that used Seth stealth technology merged with Brutari military engineering to create vessels that were both invisible and unstoppable. Human researchers who had combined the theoretical frameworks of a dozen species to develop technologies that none of them could have achieved independently. The coalition didn't destroy us because we were the most advanced species, Maya realized. They destroyed us because we were the species that made everyone else more advanced. And that's what they truly feared, Administrator Kane confirmed. Not human conquest, but human cooperation. They knew that if humans continued to exist, we would eventually unite the galaxy in ways that would make their control impossible. Maya spent the next several hours learning about the resistance network that had been operating in secret for 3 millennia. The organization was far larger and more sophisticated than she had imagined, with cells on hundreds of worlds and resources that rivaled some galactic governments. But it was also fragmented and cautious, limited by the need for absolute secrecy and the knowledge that discovery would mean extermination. The Resistance had been waiting for a catalyst, something that would allow them to move from passive preparation to active opposition. The activation of one of the Human Awakener artifacts was that catalyst, but only if the human who activated it could prove capable of the kind of integration that had made their species so dangerous to the Coalition. We need you to retrieve the other artifacts, Administrator Kane explained. Not just to awaken more humans, but to demonstrate to the Resistance that humanity has recovered its potential. Each artifact you successfully claim will rally more species to our cause and provide us with technologies we need for the coming war. Va? Maya felt the weight of the word. You're talking about another galactic conflict. The war never ended, Vextheron pointed out grimly. It just became a Cold War, with the Coalition maintaining control through surveillance, assassination, and the occasional demonstration of force. But their control is weakening. New species are achieving spaceflight, developing technologies, asking questions. The Coalition can't suppress everyone forever. An Altiron representative flowed forward, its crystalline form catching and reflecting the chamber's lights. Recent intelligence suggests that the Coalition is planning a major suppression operation. Multiple species that have shown technological advancement are being targeted for elimination or genetic modification, including the current human colonies. Maya felt cold despite the armor's perfect environmental controls. We estimate 18 months before they begin operations, Administrator Kane replied, which means we have 18 months to prepare a defense, to rally the Resistance, and to recover enough of our original capabilities to stand against them. 18 months to collect 17 artifacts scattered across the galaxy while avoiding detection by the most powerful intelligence network in known space, Maya said, calculating the impossibility of the timeline. You won't be alone, the ancient human assured her. Every artifact you successfully claim will unlock new capabilities, new allies, new resources. The Awakener you currently carry is the least powerful of the group. As you integrate with more advanced artifacts, your abilities will expand exponentially. Maya thought about her small team of newly awakened humans back on Luna Station, brave and dedicated but utterly unprepared for what they were being asked to attempt. My people don't know what they've gotten into. They think we're just trying to recover our heritage, not planning to fight a galactic war. Then, perhaps it's time to give them a clearer picture of what's at stake, Vextheron suggested, and to show them that they have allies they didn't know existed. Over the next 6 hours, Maya worked with Administrator Kane and the Resistance leadership to develop a plan that was audacious in its scope and terrifying in its implications. They would split the artifact recovery missions among multiple teams, with each team supported by resistance cells that could provide intelligence, transportation, and backup. The human teams would focus on the Awakener artifacts themselves, while resistance operatives would handle security, logistics, and misdirection. But the plan also required Maya to reveal the existence of the resistance to her team, to ask them to commit not just to recovering human artifacts, but to fighting in a war against the established galactic order. It was a commitment that would transform them from archaeological treasure hunters into revolutionaries. As the meeting concluded, Administrator Kane approached Maya privately while the others finalized operational details. The ancient human's eyes held a weight of centuries, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had seen civilizations rise and fall. There's something else you need to know, he said quietly. The genetic markers that allow humans to bond with the Awakener artifacts aren't random. They're the result of careful breeding programs maintained by resistance operatives over 3,000 years. You and the others aren't just randomly compatible humans. You're the descendants of specific bloodlines that were preserved and guided for this exact purpose. Maya felt a chill of realization. You're saying my entire life has been manipulated to bring me to this point. I'm saying your entire genetic line has been preserved specifically to produce individuals capable of leading humanity's restoration, Administrator Kane corrected. Your choices have been your own, your achievements have been your own, your path has been your own. But the potential that allowed you to make those choices, achieve those things, and follow that path was carefully maintained by people who believed that humanity deserved a second chance. The implications were staggering. Maya's parents, her grandparents, Generations of her ancestors had been unknowingly part of a breeding program designed to produce humans capable of bonding with ancient artifacts. Her natural aptitude for archaeology, her innovative approaches to problem-solving, her ability to see connections that others missed, all of it was the result of genetic potential that had been preserved across millennia. The other 42 genetic matches, she said slowly. They're all from preserved bloodlines. Each one represents thousands of years of careful genetic stewardship, Administrator Kane confirmed. And each one has the potential to become something that the galaxy hasn't seen since the Suppression War, a fully awakened human. Maya returned to Luna Station with her mind, reeling from revelations that transformed her understanding of everything. She wasn't just an archaeologist who had stumbled onto ancient technology. She was the product of a 3,000-year breeding program designed to produce humans capable of fighting a galactic war. Her mission wasn't just to recover artifacts, but to lead humanity's return to its original position as the galaxy's most innovative and integrative species. But more importantly, she had 18 months to prepare for a conflict that would determine whether humanity survived as a species or was finally eliminated entirely. When she gathered her team in the workshop and began to explain what she had learned, she watched their faces change as the true scope of their situation became clear. The wonder of discovering their heritage gave way to the weight of understanding their responsibility. They weren't just recovering the past. They were fighting for the future. Maya activated the armor's holographic displays and showed them the star maps Administrator Kane had provided, marking the locations of the 17 artifacts and the resistance bases that would support their missions. She showed them intelligence reports about coalition surveillance operations and suppression activities. She showed them genetic analyses that proved each of them carried bloodlines that had been preserved for 3,000 years specifically for this purpose. When she finished, the workshop was silent for a long time. Finally, Dr. Morrison spoke up. "How many people are we talking about?" he asked. "How big is this resistance network?" Maya consulted the data Administrator Kane had provided. Current estimates suggest approximately 40 million beings across 300 species, with active cells on over 2,000 worlds. But they're fragmented and cautious. Most cells don't know about the others, and they're all waiting for proof that humanity can actually lead an effective resistance. "And if we fail?" Elena asked quietly. "Then the coalition wins permanently," Maya replied. "They've been preparing for this possibility for 3,000 years. If they can eliminate the Awakener artifacts and the humans capable of using them, there won't be another chance. Humanity will remain a suppressed species forever, and the coalition will continue to dominate the galaxy until every innovative species has been eliminated or controlled." Marcus stood up and walked to one of the holographic displays, studying the tactical information about coalition military capabilities. "What kind of opposition are we talking about?" "The coalition has approximately 12,000 capital ships, 3 million support vessels, and military installations on over 10,000 worlds," Maya read from Administrator Kane's intelligence reports. "But they're also overextended, maintaining control over most of known space through surveillance, and the threat of force rather than actual military presence everywhere. And the resistance? Maybe a tenth of that in terms of military assets," Maya admitted. "But we have advantages they don't expect. The coalition has been operating under the assumption that the suppressed species would never coordinate effectively. They've designed their defenses against individual rebellions, not a galaxy-wide revolution." Sarah Chun, who had been studying the archaeological data, looked up from her analysis. "These artifacts aren't just weapons, are they? Some of them appear to be designed for large-scale environmental modification, possibly terraforming or ecosystem management." Maya nodded. "According to the records, original human civilization didn't just develop military technology. We developed technologies for integration, cooperation, and mutual benefit. Some of the artifacts are designed to help other species achieve their full potential, to accelerate their development in ways that benefit everyone. Which is exactly what terrified the coalition in the first place. Morrison observed. They weren't afraid of human conquest. They were afraid of human cooperation. Elena was studying the technical specifications for the artifacts, her engineer's mind already working through the implications. If we could integrate these technologies with current galactic infrastructure, we could advance civilization by centuries in just a few years. No wonder they want to keep us suppressed. Maya looked around at her team, seeing the determination replacing their uncertainty. They understood now what they were fighting for and what they were fighting against. They weren't just trying to recover lost technology or expose historical injustices. They were fighting for the right of all species to reach their full potential without interference from those who profited from keeping others weak. The first artifact we need to retrieve is on Kepler 452b, Maya announced. It's called the Integrator, and, according to the records, it's designed to enhance cooperative abilities and technological synthesis. If we can successfully claim it, we'll not only gain its capabilities, but also prove to the Resistance that we're ready to lead. What's the opposition? Marcus asked, already shifting into tactical planning mode. Maya consulted Administrator Kane's intelligence reports. The artifact is hidden in ruins that are officially off-limits due to dangerous radiation levels. But the radiation is artificial, generated by Coalition monitoring equipment designed to keep anyone from getting close enough to discover what's really there. So we'll be fighting through active defenses, Marcus concluded. Worse, Maya replied. According to Resistance intelligence, there's a Coalition suppression team stationed in the system specifically to monitor the artifact site. If we're detected, we won't just be dealing with automated defenses. We'll be facing the same kind of forces that destroyed the original human civilization. The weight of that statement settled over the workshop. They were about to attempt something that could start a galactic war 18 months ahead of schedule if they were caught, or could provide them with the resources they needed to win that war if they succeeded. Maya looked at each of her team members, knowing that she was asking them to risk everything on the chance that humanity could reclaim its heritage and lead a galaxy-wide revolution against the forces that had suppressed them for 3,000 years. We leave in 72 hours, she announced. That gives us time to prepare, to study the target, and to say goodbye to any normal life we might have had. Because after Kepler 452b, there would be no going back to ordinary human existence. They would either die as revolutionaries or succeed as the catalyst for humanity's return to its rightful place in the galaxy. The war for galactic freedom was about to begin, and it would start with a small team of humans retrieving technology that their ancestors had hidden 3,000 years ago. The approach to Kepler 452b required 3 weeks of careful navigation through space that was officially empty, but actually crawling with Coalition surveillance assets. Maya's team traveled in a modified cargo vessel that Elena had equipped with stealth systems reverse-engineered from the armor's technology, while Resistance operatives fed them intelligence about patrol routes and sensor networks. The planet itself was a testament to the Coalition's thoroughness in suppressing evidence of humanity's past. Official records listed it as a failed colony world, abandoned due to extreme radiation that made the surface uninhabitable. The reality, as revealed by Resistance intelligence, was that the radiation was artificial and selective, designed to interfere with standard archaeological equipment while leaving Coalition monitoring devices unaffected. Maya spent the journey studying every detail of their target. The Integrator artifact was hidden in what had once been the central archive of New Geneva, the capital city of humanity's most successful cooperative colony. The city had been built using integrated technologies from 17 different species, creating an urban environment that adapted and evolved to meet the needs of its diverse population. When the Coalition forces had destroyed the colony, they had been careful to preserve the archive building, knowing that it contained artifacts too valuable to destroy, but too dangerous to allow anyone else to access. The suppression team station in the system was commanded by General Voxtar, a Kytherian whose forearmed form concealed one of the most brilliant tactical minds in the Coalition military. Intelligence reports suggested that he had been specifically chosen for this assignment because of his expertise in hunting human survivors during the original Suppression War. If anyone would be prepared for human tactics and capabilities, it would be him. The good news is that they're not expecting us to have the capabilities that the armor provides, Maya told her team as they studied the tactical briefing in their ship's cramped briefing room. Coalition intelligence assumes that current humans are limited to technologies that they've observed in normal interactions. The bad news, Marcus added, consulting his analysis of the opposition forces, is that General Voxtar has 3 heavy cruisers, 48 fighter craft, and a full regiment of ground forces equipped with technology specifically designed to counter human innovation. Elena had been studying the technical aspects of their target. The artificial radiation isn't just a deterrent, she reported. It's actively interfering with quantum-level processes. If we approach in standard equipment, our technology will degrade rapidly. But the armor should be able to protect Maya from the effects. Should be, Dr. Morrison emphasized. The armor's databases don't contain specific information about coalition suppression technology developed after the war ended. We're extrapolating based on theoretical principles. Maya nodded, acknowledging the uncertainty. The mission would require her to infiltrate the archive site alone while her team provided distraction and support from orbit. The armor's stealth capabilities would get her to the artifact, but once she activated the integrator, every sensor in the system would detect the energy signature. They would have perhaps 30 minutes to extract before General Voxtar's forces converged on their position. The infiltration began at dawn on the planet's surface, using local weather patterns to mask Maya's descent from orbit. The armor's adaptive camouflage made her effectively invisible to visual detection, while its quantum dampening field confused most types of sensors. As she moved across the ruined landscape toward the archive building, Maya could see evidence of the thoroughness with which the coalition had destroyed the colony. New Geneva had once housed 12 million beings from dozens of species, all working together in a cooperative society that had achieved technological and social advances that individual species couldn't match. Now, it was a wasteland of melted structures and radiation-scarred ground, with only the central archive building standing intact in the center of the devastation. The building itself was a marvel of integrated architecture, its design incorporating aesthetic principles from every species that had contributed to the colony. Vortex crystal formations merged seamlessly with Kytherian bioarchitectural elements, while Altiron energy channeling systems were woven through structural frameworks that showed Brutari engineering influences. It was a physical representation of humanity's gift for synthesis and cooperation. Maya's approach to the building revealed the first signs of coalition security measures. Automated defense turrets emerged from concealment as she crossed their sensor perimeters, but the armor's advanced countermeasures neutralized them before they could acquire targeting locks. Energy barriers designed to stop intruders flickered and died as the armor systems analyzed and circumvented their operating principles. Inside the archive building, Maya found herself in a vast chamber filled with storage systems that represented the technological achievements of the original human civilization. Data crystals containing the accumulated knowledge of hundreds of species. Prototype devices that merged technologies in ways that current galactic science couldn't comprehend. And at the center of it all, the integrator artifact. The integrator was larger than the armor, a crystalline structure 12 feet tall that pulsed with energy patterns that seemed to respond to her presence. As Maya approached, she could feel the armor's systems beginning to resonate with the artifact, creating harmonics that awakened dormant systems throughout the archive. The moment she placed her hands on the integrator's surface, Maya's understanding of the universe expanded exponentially. The artifact wasn't just a technological device. It was a consciousness interface that allowed its user to perceive and manipulate the quantum connections between all forms of matter and energy. Through the integrator, she could sense the life patterns of every being in the solar system, the energy flows between planets, even the emotional states of her team members orbiting above. But, more importantly, the integrator revealed the true scope of humanity's original achievements. The cooperative colonies hadn't just shared technology. They had created hybrid species that combined the best characteristics of multiple evolutionary lines. They had developed ecosystem management techniques that could terraform entire worlds in decades rather than centuries. They had established communication networks that operated on quantum levels, allowing instantaneous coordination across galactic distances. The Coalition hadn't just destroyed human civilization. They had destroyed the foundation for a truly integrated galactic society that would have elevated every species to heights they couldn't achieve independently. As Maya integrated with the Integrator's systems, she felt her own capabilities expanding beyond anything the Awakener armor had provided. Her consciousness could now extend across space. Her analytical abilities could process information from multiple sources simultaneously, and her understanding of technological principles deepened to levels that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. But she also sensed the Coalition forces converging on her position. General Voxtar had detected the artifact's activation and was moving his entire fleet toward the planet. Maya had perhaps 20 minutes before the first assault forces reached the surface. Instead of preparing to flee, Maya made a decision that would fundamentally change the nature of the conflict. Using the Integrator's consciousness interface, she reached out across space to contact not just her own team, but every resistance cell within 100 light-years of her position. The message she sent wasn't just information. It was a direct sharing of consciousness that allowed every recipient to experience what she was experiencing, to understand what humanity had once been and could be again. Resistance operatives who had been waiting for proof that humans could lead an effective uprising suddenly found themselves connected to a network of awareness that demonstrated capabilities beyond their highest expectations. Elena's voice crackled through the communication system. Maya, we're detecting massive fleet movements throughout the sector. It's not just Voxtar's forces. Coalition reinforcements are arriving from 6 different systems. Maya smiled, her enhanced consciousness already aware of the Coalition response. Good. Let them come. Using the Integrator systems, Maya began activating defense protocols that had been dormant in the archive building for 3,000 years. The structure itself was more than just a repository of knowledge. It was a fortress designed to protect itself and everything it contained. Weapon systems that operated on principles current galactic science couldn't understand emerged from concealment throughout the building. Energy shields that could deflect capital ship weaponry enveloped the structure. And, most importantly, communication arrays that had been waiting millennia for reactivation began broadcasting across the galaxy. The signal that went out from New Geneva wasn't just a call for resistance. It was a complete data package containing evidence of the Coalition's crimes, technical specifications for the technologies they had suppressed, and genetic activation codes that would begin awakening dormant potential in suppressed species throughout the galaxy. Within hours, the Coalition's carefully maintained control over galactic civilization began to crumble. Species that had been kept technologically primitive for millennia suddenly had access to advancement protocols that could elevate them to starfaring status within months. Civilizations that had been told they were too young or too primitive for full galactic citizenship discovered evidence that they had once been spacefaring empires before Coalition suppression operations reduced them to planetary isolation. But, most importantly, humans throughout the galaxy began experiencing genetic awakening as dormant potential activated in response to the broadcast signals. The 43 individuals with perfect genetic markers found themselves connected to a network of consciousness that allowed them to coordinate actions across galactic distances. Humans with partial compatibility discovered that their innovative abilities were suddenly enhanced beyond anything they had previously demonstrated. General Voxtar's assault on the archive building met defenses that should have been impossible. His weapons, designed specifically to counter human innovation and technology, proved ineffective against systems that operated on principles that transcended individual species' technological frameworks. His ground forces, trained to suppress human tactics and capabilities, found themselves facing opponents who could anticipate their moves and counter their strategies before they could implement them. The battle for New Geneva lasted 18 hours and ended with the complete destruction of Voxstar's task force. But, more importantly, it demonstrated to the galaxy that the Coalition's military superiority was not absolute. Technologies that had been suppressed for millennia proved superior to anything the Coalition had developed in the intervening years. As Maya emerged from the archive building, now carrying both the Awakener armor and the Integrator artifact, she found herself facing a galaxy that had changed fundamentally in less than a day. Resistance cells that had been operating in secret for millennia were revealing themselves openly. Suppressed species were demanding answers about their true histories. And Coalition forces throughout known space were discovering that their monitoring and control systems were being systematically compromised by technologies they couldn't understand or counter. But Maya also understood that this was just the beginning. The Coalition had spent 3,000 years preparing for the possibility of human resurgence. They had contingency plans and resources that wouldn't be revealed until they were truly threatened. The easy victory at New Geneva would be followed by increasingly desperate and violent responses as the Coalition fought to maintain control of the galaxy. When Maya's ship left Kepler 452b, it carried not just the Integrator artifact, but also a complete archive of human technological achievements and historical records. More importantly, it carried the proof that humanity could indeed lead a galactic revolution against the forces that had suppressed them. The resistance network that had been waiting for 3,000 years for human leadership suddenly found itself with capabilities and resources that exceeded their most optimistic projections. Species that had been enemies for millennia discovered that their conflicts had been deliberately engineered by Coalition manipulation. Civilizations that had thought themselves alone in the galaxy learned that they were part of a vast community of beings who had been kept apart by systematic suppression. But as Maya reviewed intelligence reports about Coalition responses to the New Geneva incident, she realized that the next phase of the conflict would be far more dangerous than anything they had faced so far. The Coalition was preparing to implement final suppression protocols that would eliminate not just humans, but any species that showed signs of supporting human resurgence. The war that Administrator Kane had warned would begin in 18 months was starting immediately, and it would be a conflict that would determine not just humanity's fate, but the future of conscious life in the galaxy. Maya looked at the star maps, showing the locations of the remaining artifacts and the intelligence reports about Coalition military preparations. She had succeeded in awakening the resistance and demonstrating human capabilities, but she had also triggered a response that could destroy everything they were fighting for. The next artifact they needed to retrieve was the synthesizer, hidden on a world deep in Coalition-controlled space. Unlike the Integrator, which had been protected by distance and misdirection, the synthesizer was guarded by active Coalition forces who now knew exactly what they were protecting against. Maya's team had gone from being archaeological treasure hunters to being the primary targets of the most powerful military force in galactic history. But they had also become the focal point for a revolution that offered the galaxy's suppressed species their first real chance for freedom in 3,000 years. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the margin for error had essentially disappeared. But as Maya felt the combined capabilities of the Awakener armor and the Integrator flowing through her consciousness, she knew that humanity finally had the tools to fight for its heritage and its future. The question was whether they could master those tools quickly enough to survive what was coming. The Coalition's response to the New Geneva incident was swift, brutal, and exactly what Maya had expected. Within 72 hours of the Integrator's activation, Coalition forces had begun what they called final suppression protocols across more than 300 worlds. Species that had shown any signs of technological advancement were being systematically eliminated or subjected to genetic modification designed to permanently limit their cognitive development. But the Coalition had made a crucial miscalculation. They had assumed that the resistance network would remain fragmented and cautious even after human leadership emerged. Instead, the consciousness-sharing capabilities that Maya had unlocked through the integrator had created a coordination level that the Coalition's intelligence services couldn't comprehend or counter. Maya sat in the command center of what had once been a secret resistance base, and was now the operational headquarters for a galaxy-wide revolution. The asteroid facility had been expanded using construction techniques that merged human innovation with technologies from dozens of other species, creating a command complex that could coordinate operations across thousands of light years in real time. Administrator Kane, now awakened from his millennia-long stasis, stood beside holographic displays that showed the current state of galactic civilization. The ancient human looked both younger and older than he had in stasis, his consciousness enhanced by exposure to the integrator's capabilities, but also weighted down by the knowledge of how much had been lost during the centuries of suppression. The situation is developing faster than our most optimistic projections, he reported to the assembled resistance leadership. 47 species have openly declared independence from coalition control. 12 coalition-controlled worlds have been liberated by local resistance movements. And, most importantly, 6 additional Awakener artifacts have been successfully retrieved by human teams. Maya studied the tactical displays, noting both the successes and the growing threats. The resistance was winning individual battles and liberating suppressed populations, but the coalition was responding with increasingly desperate measures that threatened to destroy entire civilizations rather than allow them to achieve independence. "What's the status of the coalition's military response?" she asked. Vex Theron, now serving as the Resistance's primary intelligence coordinator, gestured to a display showing coalition fleet movements throughout known space. They've withdrawn forces from peripheral monitoring duties to concentrate on defending their core systems and artifact sites. But they've also activated weapon systems that we haven't seen before, technologies that seem designed specifically to counter the capabilities we've demonstrated. Maya wasn't surprised. The Coalition had spent 3,000 years preparing for the possibility of human resurgence, and they would have developed countermeasures for every capability they could imagine. The question was whether human innovation could stay ahead of Coalition responses long enough to achieve decisive victories. Elena approached with technical reports from the artifact retrieval missions. The good news is that each artifact we recover enhances our abilities exponentially. The humans who've bonded with them are demonstrating capabilities that exceed anything in the historical records. And the bad news? Maya asked, though she could already sense it through the consciousness network that linked her to every awakened human in the galaxy. The bad news is that we're running out of time, Dr. Morrison reported, his analysis of coalition biological warfare programs clearly visible through the shared consciousness link. Intelligence reports suggest that the coalition is preparing to deploy genetic weapons that would affect every human in the galaxy simultaneously. If they succeed, they won't just suppress human innovation. They'll eliminate our species entirely. Maya felt the weight of 43 awakened human consciousnesses focusing on her through the network. Each of them had retrieved artifacts and gained capabilities that would have seemed godlike just months earlier, but they all looked to her for leadership in ways that she still found overwhelming. The responsibility wasn't just for humanity's survival, but for the future of conscious evolution in the galaxy. The Coalition's final suppression protocols weren't just targeting humans and the current resistance. They were attempting to prevent any species from ever again achieving the level of cooperation and technological integration that could threaten their control. "How long do we have?" Maya asked. Administrator Kane consulted intelligence reports from resistance operatives embedded deep within coalition command structures. Best estimates suggest 96 hours before the genetic weapons are ready for deployment. They'll be launched from their primary research facility on Vega Prime, which is protected by their most advanced defensive systems and their largest military concentration. Maya felt a cold certainty settle over her consciousness. She had been avoiding the inevitable conclusion, but the tactical situation made it clear. The Resistance couldn't win a conventional war against the Coalition's military superiority, and they couldn't afford to wait for Coalition weapons to eliminate their leadership. They needed to strike directly at the source of Coalition power, and they needed to do it with overwhelming force that would end the conflict decisively. "We're going to Vega Prime," she announced. "All of us." The silence that followed was profound. Vex Theron was the first to speak, his massive Brutari form shifting uneasily. "Maya, Vega Prime is the most heavily defended system in Coalition space. They have 12 battle stations, each one capable of destroying capital ships. They have orbital defense platforms that can sterilize entire planets. And they have the Coalition's primary fleet stationed there permanently." "I know," Maya replied calmly. "But they also have something else there. Something that makes the risk worthwhile." She activated the holographic displays to show intelligence that only she had access to, information that had been revealed by the most advanced artifacts. Vega Prime wasn't just the Coalition's military headquarters and primary research facility. It was the location of the Master Archive, the repository of all the technologies and knowledge that the Coalition had stolen from suppressed species over the millennia. The Master Archive contains not just human technology, Maya explained to the assembled Resistance leadership. It contains the accumulated innovations of every species the Coalition has eliminated or suppressed. If we can capture it intact, we'll have access to technologies that could advance galactic civilization by millions of years. And if we're destroyed attempting it, Administrator Kane asked quietly. Maya looked at the ancient human who had sacrificed 3,000 years of life to preserve humanity's future. Then the Coalition wins permanently, and conscious life in this galaxy remains suppressed forever. But if we succeed, we'll have the resources to create the kind of integrated galactic civilization that humanity originally envisioned. The planning for the assault on Vega Prime required every resource the Resistance had accumulated over 3 millennia. Ships that had been hidden for centuries emerged from concealment and received upgrades using recovered human technologies. Weapons systems that merged the capabilities of dozens of species were constructed using manufacturing techniques that the galaxy hadn't seen since before the Suppression War. Most importantly, the 43 awakened humans began a consciousness integration process that would allow them to coordinate the assault with precision that no military force in galactic history had ever achieved. Maya spent the preparation time studying the Master Archive's layout and defensive systems, but she also found herself contemplating the broader implications of what they were attempting. Success would mean not just human liberation, but the beginning of a new phase of galactic evolution in which cooperation and integration replace suppression and control. Failure would mean the end of humanity and the permanent victory of forces that viewed innovation and cooperation as threats to be eliminated. The assault fleet that approached Vega Prime 72 hours later was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Ships that operated on hybrid technologies moved in formations that merged tactical principles from dozens of species. Weapons that combined energy manipulation techniques created effects that Coalition defenders couldn't counter. And, most importantly, every ship in the fleet was coordinated by awakened human consciousness that could anticipate and respond to threats faster than any conventional command structure. But as the fleet entered the Vega system, Maya realized that the Coalition had prepared one final surprise. The defensive systems around Vega Prime weren't just protecting the planet and the Master Archive. They were protecting something else, something that the Coalition had been building during the 3,000 years since the Suppression War ended. The artificial moon orbiting Vega Prime wasn't a space station or a weapons platform. It was a consciousness suppression device on a scale that defied comprehension, designed to eliminate innovative thinking in every sentient being within a radius of several light years. If the Coalition succeeded in activating it, they wouldn't just win the current war. They would ensure that no species in this region of the galaxy would ever again be capable of the kind of thinking that could threaten their control. Maya felt the collective realization ripple through the awakened human consciousness network as her teammates understood what they were facing. The Coalition hadn't just prepared to defeat human resurgence. They had prepared to lobotomize an entire section of the galaxy to prevent any future challenges to their authority. The battle for Vega Prime lasted 14 hours and involved technologies that transcended anything in recorded galactic history. Maya, wearing both the Awakener armor and carrying the Integrator artifact, led assault teams that could move through space without ships, manipulate matter at the molecular level, and coordinate actions across the battlefield through shared consciousness. But the Coalition's defenses proved that they had learned from 3,000 years of suppressing